Good evening, everybody. We'll get started in a minute.
Good evening.
Very good to see you, Supervisor Alcorn.
Thank you, Mark. Good to see you.
Good to see you, but you missed the cicada stories.
I might hear it again later. I don't know.
Penniman.
Hello.
Okay, well, it's 7:01. It looks like we've got most folks on, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody, to this June 1st, 2021 meeting of the Reston Comprehensive Plan Task Force. Jose, if you could go ahead and put up the agenda for tonight. So we're going to have several updates per usual, and then go over the task force dates that we've got scheduled for the rest of this month and next month. And then we're going to dive into land use issues in the non-TOD TSA districts. So I think by now, for better or worse, probably most folks on the task force understand exactly what that means. So in heavy duty jargon, but yet we are going to be, Commissioner Carter is going to lead us through a discussion of those districts and the comprehensive plan recommendations. And Jose, do we have anything past that? I don't believe we do. Oh, we do actually have, that's right, the Virginia Tech recommendations. And there's a little bit of overlap because the Virginia Tech recommendations included, if everybody remembers, both some ideas on conversion of older office parks into other uses, and some good food for thought there. But they also recommended the linear park concept, which we'll come back to that. So any questions on the agenda? All right, then let's go ahead and get started with the first update is on energy and environment. Tammy or Bill, have an update on that?
Sure. I sent Tammy and Doug Britt, who's not on the task force, but is deeply knowledgeable of these energy and environmental issues, particularly as they relate to Reston. A further draft in May, which we got a chance to finally have a lengthy discussion of last week. Based on that, I sent them further revisions over the weekend, and once I've heard back, we will hopefully be in a position to circulate something. So that's coming up soon.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Thanks for moving forward with that, and look forward to seeing the draft. Any questions for Bill? Okay, Jose, what was the next update?
Yeah, we had Parks and Open Space, and I think Larry's on, so he's happy to.
Larry?
I guess I could chime in first, and I could tag team it with Larry. So we're gonna be sending out a new version of the Parks and Open Space. So we had the version control issue with what Larry was working on, and also something that Commissioner Carter and Larry, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I thought I had clicked that. I apologize.
Yes, no worries.
Jose said the first part of it. So we've got a new version of, was essentially the second draft. And I think we're going to be sending that out tomorrow so that we can have a discussion about it next week. That is our intent. So Jose, John, and I have looked at that as recently as this afternoon, and so hopefully tomorrow you'll be getting that new draft.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Larry. Any questions?
Looks good to me. Looks good to me. John Carter.
Oh, there we go.
Jose, could you send me the links again to this? I don't seem to be able to get, it's on my phone, but I can't seem to get it on my computer.
Yeah, happy to. I just sent it to you, but I'll try to resend it right now.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions, comments for Larry on parks and open space? Okay, very good. What's next there, Jose? What's on the updates?
We had Heritage Resources, and I think Christina.
Oh, yes, Chris.
Yes, I had a meeting with county staff last week, went really well. They already have my first draft and they were supposed to get me comments on it this week, but since it's a holiday, I'm not surprised they didn't get it today. As I was telling Jose, once I hear back from them and their general reaction to it was they didn't have many concerns. So my hope is next Monday we might have a draft for you all to look at. The graphics are actually the thing that's taking the longest because we want to be sensitive to information that's shared on there. So that may be the one hanging item that might not be with the text.
All right, very good. Thank you very much, Chris. Any questions on Heritage Resources? Okay, and then Jose, I think we have one more update.
Yes, the last one was on our equity and public health group. Yeah.
And is that Michelle?
Yeah, I think
That's me.
Michelle is on. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi. Okay. Hi. So let's see. We met as a group and we reviewed some of the feedback and suggested edits we received. And we're hoping to have just an updated version of the guidance to send your way soon. And then we'll be moving on to, we're actually going to call it community health instead of public health. So we'll be moving on to community health with our next meeting, which we need to schedule, and we'll have that hopefully get working on that very soon.
Okay, very good. Any questions for Michelle or the Equity and Community Health subgroup?
Just a quick question, Mark Malcolm. Can you give a quick idea of the definition of community health different from public health? What distinguishes it to make the change?
Sure. So for public health, I think most people would think of, health and human services provided by the government. So we're not only looking at what is provided by Fairfax County, but we're looking at the broader health of the entire community. And so I think we had sent around kind of an overview a while back, but it does it captures a number of issues outside of just health and human services.
So there are some elements that you're addressing of what private concerns may be able to contribute to the county and the comprehensive plan.
Right, that's correct.
So for Alcorn, we cannot hear you.
Thank you, Mark. I got to hit that unmute button. I haven't done that in a while. So Michelle, thank you very much. I know you and the subgroup are working very hard, as are a number of other folks who've given updates. Are there any other updates tonight that anyone wants to flag or provide info on or ask about? Okay, then let's keep going. We do have listed there, we do have a pretty ambitious set of meeting dates. Let's keep going, and I appreciate everybody working to try to move through the next couple of months. I think tonight, actually, in the land use discussion, let's see how that goes. But I know with some of the topic areas and subgroups, they're definitely We're getting pretty close on several of those. So thanks everybody again for that. So at this point, if there are no other questions, let's go into agenda item number 3, review and direction land use and non-TOD TSA districts. Commissioner Carter, are you fully logged on at this point?
No, I'm having trouble getting on here. I wonder if Jose could send it to me again. For some reason that didn't work the last one. And it says passwords are locked out. I didn't even know I had a password, but could you give that a try again?
Yeah, happy to try again. I'll send you the attendee link. I think Tammy has a physical hand up.
Yeah, Tammy's got a virtual hand too. Tammy, go right ahead.
Thank you. I have a question. What is the official year date of the plan we're working on now? 2020, 2021, or 2022? We are going to want to address this in some of our comments.
Well, that's a good question. St. Clair or Chris, do you have a thought on that? Is it usually the year that the plan's adopted that gets the moniker, or how does that work?
Yes, this is St. Clair Williams. I believe, yes, it would be based on when the plan is adopted. So I think that's the date we'd want to be looking at.
And are we looking, Walter, what do you think? Is this going to go before the Board of Supervisors in 21 or January when
Well,
we flip to North County?
Yeah, if we can get through the task force this summer, then I'm hoping we can do the public outreach in the fall, and then Planning Commission and Board. If not by the end of the year, then very early into 2022.
Yeah, because this isn't the land use committee taking a hiatus from July through December to try to get a grip on what has happened. That was what they announced months ago, and then start up again with hearings
North
and
County.
stuff. Right. Well, yeah, in January.
Right.
They
Right.
wanted a
So,
downtime to look at what's happened and see what adjustments needed to be made.
yeah, it's a good point, Tammy, and actually there are probably several reasons we need to try to stick on the schedule, and that is one of them.
Okay, so we can guess it's going to be 2022.
Yeah, I guess there's not a month. My best guess right now is probably January 2022.
Okay, thank you so much. That helps.
Yeah.
So we're going to be putting this, referring to the comp plan 2021 or 22, and we don't want to retype that stuff if we don't have to.
Right. Good point. Okay, thank you, Tammy. Any other questions, comments at this point? Okay, John, it looks like you're still just on the phone. Is that correct?
I see another John.
No, there's another John. This one's capital John, capital J and C.
And the one
I'm feeling optimistic.
The one on the phone is muted.
So this one's working, isn't it?
Yeah, there we go.
Yay.
All right.
All right.
I don't know what was wrong.
There's no telling, but it looks like at least well, we can see your name, and I think you should be able to share your screen at some point. Let's see if that works.
Is it working?
Not yet. Oh, there we go.
It's working.
All right.
Okay, John, the floor is yours.
Okay, so we'll give this a try. This is the first attempt at this. We're going to keep it kind of broad, and I've got a pencil here, and we're going to mark down everything we can. So it's mostly an overview, and what I've got is what does the last comp plan say, and then we'll figure out what to do in the new one. So the non-TSA, the non-TOD districts in the transit station area, that's an interesting topic. So that's on the lower slide, that's the blue. So we're going to go through these one by one.
John, could I interrupt you?
Yes.
There might be that's a little bit small on the screen. I wonder, I don't know if it's possible to do full screen.
That is full screen.
Oh, okay, sorry. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Keep on going.
I'm not, let's see, maybe I can increase this. Hold on. Is that
Yeah,
better?
Oh, that's better. Yeah, thank you.
Much better. Yep.
Let's see, it's off the screen a little bit, so.
John, in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, there's 3 little buttons. If you press the one on the right, that should go to full presentation mode, and it should bring the whole thing up.
Does that work?
Go to the bottom left-hand side of your screen.
Yeah.
Next to where it says, what is it, normal view? Click the third one.
There you go.
There
How
we go.
about that one?
That's it. There we go.
Okay.
My 5th grader taught me that.
I can usually do that, but it's usually in a different spot, but oh well. So that's the language out of the plan. The non-TOD districts vary in character, and the mix of uses present within each of these districts, unless otherwise noted, should maintain their existing character, uses, and zoned intensities due to their proximity to existing residential neighborhoods outside of the TSAs. This district is developed almost exclusively with low-density office parks. Now, and these are the districts that I've listed them. Now we know it's really not, there are a lot of low-density office parks, but there's a lot of other things in these districts. So we'll need to probably change that text a bit. And then the map on the bottom is the concept with, again, the blue being all of the areas that we're going to cover tonight. And the map on the top is the air photo overlaid with these various districts. I'm going to keep versions of this up, and you'll see the land use at the top. So now, what do we have? The gray areas are most of the areas that we're going to talk about. And I thought it was useful just to lay out the zones, at least the major characteristics of the zone. So you have I3, I4, and I5. A lot of I3 in it, but you have the other zones as well. And then you see the lot size requirements. This is right out of the zoning ordinance. You see the FAR. So the FAR is pretty much universally 0.5 today in those industrial zones, with some exceptions, for instance, I5. And we only have a little bit of that over there by the McDonald's. The open space is fairly small from my perspective, so 15%. And then the building heights are allowed pretty much universally in all of the 75 feet. So that's what we have today. And I thought it would be useful to start off with that, especially if we keep the actual description of them, because the last plan basically kept these as is and didn't have new recommendations for them. Now, what we talked about in the past is developing a set of criteria. If we propose any development in this area, we would develop a set of criteria. These are the 11 principles that we've looked at last fall. So those might be a hint at what the criteria might be. Another way to do this would be 4 categories. One would be the placemaking, and once we finish all the other chapters, some of the criteria would flow into this. So for instance, the health and wellness chapter, there's under placemaking, you'd have health and fitness for all. We're going to have an affordable housing, so housing for all. Then we recognize that this area has a small amount of retail, but it has a lot of service industries, from auto repair to electricians to carpenters, to a lot of businesses like that. It has a post office in it. It has a small hotel, has different uses. This has a diversity of uses, mostly not major corporations in this. This is where our small businesses are located, this plus perhaps the village centers. So there would be the criteria, and I'm not saying this is the final criteria. This is something that we should work on. So neighborhood and placemaking, the transportation, mobility, and pedestrian orientation. We know these are not, it's a pretty long distance from the transit station itself. So we need to concentrate in other areas. And I know some have talked about the parking, so I put parking criteria, appropriate parking levels. We would have to flush that out, what that means exactly. Green neighborhood and energy conservation. We're looking forward to that chapter. Here's maybe some highlights that'll be in that chapter. We know electric charging stations, we know green building certifications, but some of these other things, consideration of site planning for solar orientation, facing east or west or north or south, emphasizing daylight lighting and worrying about building height and its impact on the shading. And then finally is environmental conservation. Now this area is the headwaters of the Potomac in this area. So there are streams, there are wetlands, believe it or not. We could work on habitat protection. We probably ought to have a forest canopy recommendation. Of course, stormwater management is always a major item. And then we would be concerned about the coverage. So that's an idea of what the criteria could be. So now let's launch into what it is. Now this is a map that has all sorts of things on it. This is a list of at least highlighted some of the things that are in here. Woodland Park, it has wetlands, there's county-owned parcels, there's a hospital, Sprint campus, YMCA, there are restaurants of a variety of types. There's industrial uses like the RA warehousing or maintenance yard. There is a post office, I already mentioned, a whole host of different uses, mostly at fairly low density. So now here's the first one. So on the bottom is, now these are right out of the comp plan. This language is right out of the comp plan. This district is at the western boundary of the Herndon Transit Station. And you see it's outlined in that navy blue color. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's over there to the west. Includes Woodland Park, a major mixed-use development with office, hotel, retail uses, including a grocery store and multifamily residential development. It also includes the Great Oak subdivision, which includes single-family detached units and housing. And I know there are people that either live in this area or live in it close by. You can see the land use plan on the bottom. The yellow is residential, a couple different densities, and the upper level is mixed use. There's a smaller scale, more of the village scale, which is Woodland Park. You have some businesses like offices on the western part, like BAE Systems, and then there's a fair amount of residential. So that's what's there today. This is mostly approved. I actually wouldn't make any changes to this. So at this point, I'll stop and hear from any comments on what you think should be the land use be in this area.
All right, John, thank you. Any comments? And actually, I'll just flag Mark Malcolm. You got any thoughts on this one? I know you watched
Yeah,
this
since I
closely.
live there very much with that.
Yes.
The key, Great Oaks isn't going to change, but there is an issue with Woodland Park for what we've discussed multiple times regarding the Reston and the TSA areas. Getting developers to work together for those things that are public use areas, the ball fields are type things. One developer had planned to do a shopping center type thing. not happen, conditions not right. You're right that the Woodland Park area, except for what's on the far west and what's on the far east, is basically office buildings at present, but was to turn some of that into mixed use, but the developers, Tishman Speyer and others, that hadn't come to fruition, might come in the future. But there is an opportunity for ball field type things to be in that area that won't happen unless there is multiple developer cooperation. And that is the point that I want to make regarding that particular area. All I have to say
Okay.
right now.
Do you have any recommendations on the land use?
The land use is pretty much what you're going to concentrate any kind of mixed use development that was similar to what was planned in the TOD area to continue into the Woodland Park area. It's already got the street networks that to make most of that happen right now.
Okay. All right. Is anybody else?
John, this is Bill.
So actually, before we move on, Mark, thank you. And also, maybe some more language in there to encourage collaboration across landowners and developers, right?
Yes, that's what I wrote down.
Yeah.
I'm keeping careful notes. Particularly with respect to recreation, I think was the comment.
Yeah,
That is in
John,
fact the focal point.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
John,
sorry,
can
Bill, to
you-
cut you off there.
sorry,
It's okay.
What's
okay,
the
just
open
looking-
space there? What is the park? What's there for park or rec?
At present, the only things that are really in that area are small pocket type parks particularly in what would be Woodland East, which is really in the TOD area shown. There's also a little bit of the similar type development that is in the far western part that's developed with apartment, a couple of basically walkable features in the apartment buildings that are on the far western side where where there is one hotel, but also over 500 units of apartment condos that have been developed in that area. But in the center part, it's got a fair amount of, if you will, the high voltage power lines and such that there are a couple of areas toward the center where you can have basically anywhere from 2 to 8 ball field type things, depending on what's the cooperation of how they develop things. Right now, the dead center area of the Woodland Park area was intended to be basically somewhat like a small mini town center for residential above retail spacing plus 1 or 2 more hotels. But Tishman Speyer and the other developer that pushed those plans with the county have never gone forward with actually having any development, which I'm aware of. The property's been sold once, maybe twice since then.
Is there any recreation in the yellow area, in the residential area, or can you get across the street?
In the yellow area at present, in the Sprint area, there is one indoor sport, typical fitness facility. In the wetland area, there's nothing really other than the walk area that's owned by the Massachusetts Mutual Land Holding Company. In the area that is on the west side of Monroe Street, there is basically pocket park type stuff with one small field and basically walkways that are through the treed area. There's also right against Monroe Street, Ian apartment building complex. On their south side, they have done some made basically also the equivalent of a pocket park recreational area for their residents in private use. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but nothing in the yellow area.
When I'm speaking to the yellow area, if you look at the eastern side of the Woodland Great Oaks and extend that line on the north side forward, that is Monroe Street.
Right.
Okay, so the pocket area that's on the west side of Monroe Street, I'm referring to, that is known as Woodland Park East. And that's got a 500 apartment building called the Ian Apartments that opened a month or two ago.
Right.
And has almost 200 some townhomes that have been built. And you've
Right,
got
but that's the
Woodland,
mixed use. That's the mixed use area. I'm thinking of
that's
the
part of the
residential.
mixed use area, and that I was referring to has basically pocket park type
Yes.
development that has been
Yes.
done.
Okay,
Anything else?
good.
Bill, I think has a comment.
Yes, I would simply note that I go to the Woodland Park, what Mark may have referred to as its town center. It's the one, a little shopping area that has, some restaurants and a Harris Teeter and Moby Dick. So I go there a lot for that. But I would just note that most of the shops have closed down. They apparently they did not have enough density in the residential immediately above and behind it. And I don't know, and it's not terribly close to a lot of people, it seems. In any event, they seem to be having trouble keeping their retail going. It's something to watch.
Bill, I'm going to have to speak to that a little bit. They raised the rents a little bit. I know a number of the former businesses that have been there, including my dentist. That isn't the shopping center retail area I was referring to that has yet to be built. It is further to the west, basically in the dead center of what would be not the Great Oaks area, but the Woodland Park area. If you split that blue thing essentially in half, what it is you've got Sunrise Valley Drive, and what's on the north side of Sunrise Valley Drive, that is Woodland Park. What is on the south side of Sunrise Valley Drive going all the way over to the far left side or west side, that is Centerville Road. The south side of it, that is Great Oaks, to clarify. So on the corner of the Great Oaks, then that is the Clock Towers Shopping Center. It has the giant and about 40 some businesses on that. And so there has been a tendency that the apartment complexes and condos on both sides focus more toward that larger shopping center. It's a transition before things will refill, and maybe there may be another little shopping center in the middle. Okay, hope that helps clarify.
Sounds like Bill Penniman needs to go more often, so. Spend more money, Bill. Are there any land use recommendations coming out of that?
I'll see what I can do, John.
Okay.
I walk to the Harris Teeter on a regular basis from my home.
I think Gary
All right,
has a
thank you
hand.
both.
I'm gonna move
looks
on.
like Gary, do you have your
Okay.
hand up? Gary Maupin?
Yes, I do. Just
Okay, go
talking
ahead.
about the cooperation between developers. How would we're going to put some words in here that talk about that, but how do we really make that happen? And I guess I'd be interested in what Mark Looney has to say about that as well. So.
Yeah, Mark, you've had some experience with that. I know a lot of it depends on timing, but would you want to address that, Mark?
Sure, I'll try my best, and obviously I can't speak for all of the property owners out there. I'll say it this way, it's very difficult, even under the best of circumstances, to get multiple developers to try to cooperate on things, largely because of timing differences between what they're doing in one place and what somebody else might be pursuing in another place, number one. Number two, where it has been successful, there's typically some sort of relationship between and among entities that come to bear, or there's just I'll call it a ready-made opportunity for cooperation that existed in that particular circumstance. One example that I know Supervisor Alcorn is familiar with in Tyson's, there was an off-site ball field that was provided off of Gallows Road associated with the borough development, where one of the entities that was involved in the borough had a surface parking lot, as I recall, that was able to be converted into a ball field on another side of Tyson's. But that entity just happened to have, I wouldn't call it surplus property, but property that was less valuable than where the borough was going to go. And so they were able to reprogram that into a ball field. There are other circumstances where I'll say property owners have, from a timing perspective, been able to maybe jointly fund something. There was another site in Tyson's where a master developer, as they were selling off parcels, kind of held back a parcel for a ball field, and then purchasers who came into the development effectively just paid for that ball field development and were able to take credit for it. The one place that I'm aware of in in Reston, where so far that process is at least in place, is Brookfield's acquisition of the 7 acres off of Hunter Mill Road near the toll road. They purchased the property, dedicated it to the Park Authority, and then there's another developer who, if something doesn't happen on associated with their site, then they'll pay to construct the ball field on the property that Brookfield developed. But that was really kind of spearheaded by the county pointing out the opportunity and candidly some I'll say some overlapping consultants who were involved in that from a timing perspective that made it work. All my point is that it's very difficult to really focus in on that, which is why in most circumstances, the developers have been proffering money based on their pro rata share of the park authority's estimated cost to acquire and develop ball fields, with the expectation that the park authority will in fact step in and purchase whatever the property is or pay to develop the ball fields, as opposed to a developer who's building a 300 unit apartment building somehow trying to figure out how to get 5 or 7 acres somewhere on the toll road for a ball field. It's just really difficult to do it.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Good question, Gary. Do you have any follow-up on that, Gary?
So, in terms of our words, I don't know if Mark has any suggestions on, exactly what we might want to say here that would help make that happen. I have a long explanation, so.
I've got a couple of suggestions might be useful. One is we want a street to connect from east and west, which should be a simple thing. And so the developers would need to get together and make sure that street connects through all the parcels. That can be done probably easily without too much collaboration. And then certainly the parks, perhaps, I don't know if there's land left for a larger field, but we could look at that. And then the last one, hopefully Michelle will connect here a little bit. Maybe something along the healthy lifestyles. I don't know, a fitness trail that perhaps would go along with the street and connect the various developers together. I think when you're talking about connecting developers together, the collaboration is much easier. If you're talking about building a public facility, that's more difficult to do. So I don't know, those are a couple ideas that we probably could put in the text.
Doesn't it come down to how much pressure the staff puts on people? They are coming in for rezoning. They don't have any rights.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if in the transportation section, for instance, we showed a street that connected all the way through this, and we may already, I don't know, that would be a issue of collaboration, and the staff would be looking for that when the developers come in, and each developer would do their part. The only trouble here is a lot's been done and a lot's been approved. So how far?
But, a fitness trail doesn't get you a ball field.
No, it
I
doesn't.
think that's the real question: is how can you,
No.
if you can't incentivize them to cooperate, how can you incentivize a single developer to do it? Then are there incentives or any kind of laxness that can be given to make that happen? Because I don't know. A fitness trail doesn't seems a far reach from what I think the desire is there.
I don't think
Sorry
we
for
should give up
interjecting.
on. I don't think we should give up on incentivizing them to cooperate. Just because
Yeah.
it's hard doesn't mean it can't be done.
Right.
You know, that's not an excuse. But
No, but where one will do it, I would, if one will do it, I'll happy to have one build that ball field too, though. I'd rather have many roads to roam than just a single one too.
Keep in mind that the land is scarce, right?
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
that's the issue. The land is scarce. It's either in production or in utilization now, or you're buying it based on, a developer is buying it based on its potential value going forward. And they're paying retail market prices for the land.
Yeah.
And so the notion that somehow the developer is going to get a deal on 12 acres of a relatively small pool of land, and dedicate 12 acres of that land to a ball field at fair market value prices is just very difficult to imagine in my mind. It's one thing to take, on a 5-acre parcel, it's one thing to take an area and put a volleyball field in. It's walking trails, all of that stuff is somewhat expected as you go through the process. But the park authority wants like 5 to 7 acres at a minimum for just a single ball field, and they would prefer to have 12 or 14 for multiple ball fields in one location. And there's just not 12 to 14 acre parcels out there, or to the extent they exist, they're in the areas that John was talking about earlier, which are at the perimeters of the TSA areas, and there are half a dozen or more owners of those parcels. And so even to cobble together 12 acres among 4 owners outside of the TSA areas and dedicate that land to a ball field, you're paying retail prices for existing buildings plus the land, which makes it an incredibly expensive ball field relative to everything else, which is why a lot of times you're seeing, even in Tyson's, there's a lot of repurposing or not repurposing, putting ball fields on top of parking decks, as an example, putting basketball courts on top of parking decks as a way to be able to utilize or deal with the fact that there's a limited supply of land.
Hi, this is Richard Cabellos from the Southgate Community Center. Is there ever, I know it's also in the chat though, I know if there's scarce land in this type of area, couldn't maybe a playground or something smaller than a ball field, like a futsal court or a basketball court that doesn't take so much land? Would that be a possibility in these type of areas? Instead of thinking ballparks, maybe like playgrounds and something more like a urban type of park?
Well, actually, I'll speak a little bit.
That's where I was going, that if you're trying to promote health in the community, it doesn't necessarily gravitate towards a big soccer field. Health is, it's for all ages. So maybe there's something we can do here that's short of a ball field. Not that a ball field wouldn't be a great idea. There is some topography issues here, but anyway, I think the broader notion of health, rather than just going to diamond or a soccer field. Let's go ahead and see what we can do.
Mark
Yeah.
Malcolm, if I may speak one more time.
Yeah, John, or Mark, yes.
With this, be aware that there is one ball field that does exist presently, a baseball field. It is at Sunrise Valley and on the east side of Wood Oak Drive. What it is on both sides of Wood Oak Drive, that was where at one point there was the intent to develop basically this retail, residential, mixed-use center. This is an area that is roughly 10 to 14 acres of almost entirely either green space or parking lot. You've got Occam Solutions that's on the west side, basically between Sunrise Valley Drive and Cooperative Way. You've got Metro Offices, BMC Software, and Deltech that are toward the back, Mantech International. This is an area that can be, eventually is going to have some type of either higher office development or converted into mixed use, depending on what you believe will happen, since this is sort of halfway in between the Herndon Monroe Station and Innovation Center that's to the west. Anyway, one existing ballpark. I agree very much if you're using garage type facilities, having the upper surface is the potential. It's being innovative, not just putting stuff on ground. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark. And John, I believe we've got two more hands, but we probably should try to move on. I know you've gotten a lot of feedback and you can come back with some language. So we got Myra and Tammy. So Myra, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I am somewhat familiar with this property because we do also go to the shopping center there on occasion. But I just want to make a comment that to the west of here is the Arrowbrook Soccer Complex. And just north of that across the toll road is Hutchinson Park, which we've also used as for soccer. So those are two soccer facilities. And there's a playground over there at Arrowbrook. So those are not too far away, but two things that I'm thinking about. One is I've walked all the trails over there to the east. I also think if there's any way to connect to some of these Reston trails, in driving through there, it seems very urban and concrete. And so I'm hopeful that trees will fill in, because right now it's not a very pleasant environment. It just doesn't seem to fit with Reston's full trees. So if there's a way to connect all these properties, I think that's one thing. The other thing I thought about is, is there any way to work with companies who might have employees there during the day that at night they don't, and therefore you could help, ask them if you could put up some basketball hoops and they leave them there. And so at night, when the parking lot's empty, kids can use a parking lot for Foursquare or basketball. That might be an urban solution that works for, I don't know if there's a liability issue or what, but it's just something to think about in trying to repurpose a parking lot. Kids can play anywhere.
Myra, thank you very much. And John, I know you're taking notes, but maybe think about that as well as something for some language in the plan.
I think that's good. I've got it down. Thank you, Maura.
Okay, and then Tammy, I believe.
Thank you. My comment is a sadness that this density was approved without provision for playgrounds. There's a school not too far away where most of the playground area of the school is gone. A building has been put on its campus instead of allowing open space for kids to play. I'm really sad about this. I'm speaking to the staff. This is what we're getting. We're getting areas without sufficient open space and rec for thousands of residents that are going in there. And I watch, and I'm not saying this is a crime-ridden area, but I watch this, and it's very dense, and there's a lot of crime over there. And it's a varied amount of crime. It's not like, muggings or anything like that. It's a variety of stuff, which indicates to me that there's a lot of stress there. And I hope that we all learn from this and predicate and prioritize playgrounds. So we don't need necessarily to have big fields, but we do need trees, placemaking, pleasant places to be. Moira's comment that it's a lot of concrete is very disturbing. So that's my comment. Please, let's watch it in the future and be sure that this plan has a lot of green, a lot of canopy, and a lot of healthy stuff, so that it's a relief from the concrete jungle. Thank you.
Maybe this was a
All
good
right,
one to
thanks.
start.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Go ahead, John.
Next, any
Yeah,
more?
thank you very much, Tammy. Yeah, I don't see anything else. So we got a lot of good feedback. And
Yeah, that was
gentlemen,
great.
we'll be coming back with some more updated language, right? Or updated language.
Right. I'm going to take the comments and put them right in. Very good
Okay.
comments, I thought.
All right, let's go. Yeah, keep going, John.
Okay, Central Sunrise Valley. Now this is dominated by USGS. We don't usually say much about federal facilities. I'm not sure why, but we don't. There's some office buildings on the east side. You can see the blue at the bottom, that's USGS. There's a data center is the gray area, which is pretty much under construction, soon to be finished. And then there's some low-rise office buildings. The language in the text, this is actually out of the plan again, and it's pretty accurate. I don't know if there's any new recommendations for this. There's no residential in this. Well, actually, there is a new approved residential building along Sunrise Valley Drive.
Anyone have comments or questions on this area?
Walter, this is Bill. Just one
Yeah,
comment.
Bill.
One comment. The language refers to the USGS properties as including a significant amount of undeveloped land. Well, it's also woodland. It's forest. That's what we've been trying to preserve is tree canopies. So let's recognize it as woodland. And if we need more access in terms of trails and utilization of it, that's great. But let's not just blow it off as something that should be developed. Which is probably not what John is suggesting, but just
That's a
keep
great
that in
point.
mind.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We need to carry that through a lot of this probably.
Yeah.
As we,
You see that in the criteria up front on the first page.
There's also one more thing to consider very specifically, and it deals with the Reston Town Center area and the huge amount of residential that's added. The existing comprehensive plan called for another elementary school, either in the Reston Town Center North, but also on this property adjacent to Dogwood by the consideration of reducing the amount of ground surface area used for parking it's sort of a similar thing that's happened over here in Monroe. Convert a good bit of the ground surface parking for USGS to parking garage to allow another elementary school to be built on this portion of property. And yes, maintain a good bit of the tree cover. But that's one of the potential uses. And I had discussed that before with Supervisor Hudgens on a couple of occasions.
All right, thank you, Mark. Other comments on Central, where are we? Central Sunrise Valley, I believe?
Yes, Central Sunrise Valley.
This is Chris Daniel. I'll just observe,
Yeah.
we're going to note it in the heritage section that the USGS complex was actually just recently determined National Register eligible for its design. So while that's not a concern for us, it's a concern for USGS, and we're going to try to note that so we have recognition of that. Because again, the complex itself is a unique property from its whole operation and nature. But I agree with the comment about noting that they are preserving that woodland state. I think that's a positive to highlight there.
I have a comment. This is Moira. 2 comments. One is,
Yeah, Moira.
I've walked that property as well, but I don't know that there's access through the woodlands, which would be nice if you could access it. I don't know that you can. And then the other thing is there's already Dogwood Elementary School there. I personally don't think we should be putting another school on that property. I think we should look elsewhere.
Okay, thank you, Moira. I see Michelle, is that your hand up?
Yes, I was going to say something similar to Moira. There is a path that you can walk through there. So there's already an active use on the property. My family, we walk that quite often, actually. It's very nice.
Okay, good to know. I actually have not walked that path.
I walked that and got not arrested, but told to get off by the security. But anyway,
Well, we haven't gotten kicked off yet, but we go on the weekends, so yeah.
John, you need to take a stroller. when you
I
go.
guess,
Yeah, Michelle might be nicer, let's face it.
yes, that might be. That's definitely the case.
Any other comments or thoughts on Central Sunrise Valley?
Okay, we'll move along to Reston Heights, which is right over here. This is the Sheridan and the JBG redevelopment. There was actually nothing in the comp plan about this site. I'm not sure why. It must have been overlooked, maybe because it was part of an existing approvals. I don't know. That is along the Reston Parkway, and we have some people calling for that to be a linear park. So perhaps we could say that, perhaps. Doesn't look very good along there.
Do we also have a problem with how do you, I think this came before the Reston Planning and Zoning Committee, where right now, how are we getting people to the metro? Who are
Yeah, there
living-
is an issue there.
Yeah, I mean, I drive there and I really don't get it. If you're living in some of the new buildings to the east, how you're going to get across safely.
Yeah, you have to come down to Sunrise Valley. They would like to connect at mid-block, which is where the Wegmans site, the purple, has a mid-block connection there. I don't know why they get it and why Wegmans gets it, but JBG doesn't. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Is that the underpass?
No, it's not an underpass.
No.
It's at grade.
Ah, okay, thanks.
John, isn't there a plan for that? I thought there was even an approval for that, but maybe not.
There's an approval on the Wegmans, but not on Reston Heights. They bring it up every time they bring it to P&Z, as you know, but it's not getting anywhere. But that's a thought.
John, does this include Association Drive, or is this?
No,
No.
okay, it's not.
I'm trying to interpret the map. It's so small. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is Larry. I know FCDOT has looked at a couple different designs for doing an at-grade crossing to get people across the toll road
Yeah.
and entry point so that they can get over to the Wegmans from the Reston Heights area. But it's a struggle getting a design that is both safe and efficient.
Bill, do you remember anything coming up in the P&Z meeting about this? I think it's been there once or twice. It's mostly internal issues, but
Short answer is I wouldn't trust my memory on this. It was discussed It was discussed at the last task force. I guess I'd heard it so many times I thought it had been approved, but maybe not.
So it came before us within the past few months, and that there was still no answer, because that was we were looking at one part. I forget. I think they were changing something with one of the parking garages, and they still didn't have an answer on how residents were going to get to the metro or to Wegmans.
It's an exact twin almost to the Wheelie, getting across Wheelie east
yes,
west.
it is.
Exact twin.
It is.
So it's just a really difficult.
Yeah.
But it's something that, I mean, we have to figure out, because now we're going to have a whole bunch of people who are just going to,
They're just going to run across. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and so, I mean, this is another problem that we're facing. Plans were allowed to go through with no consideration for how people are even going to access the metro. This is just, we need to figure these things out.
Okay.
Well, it certainly needs to be addressed in this comprehensive plan, right, John? So you're to write words that addresses this. Is that?
Yeah, I think we should go for it. I think we should go for the connection. It's been talked about. It's a little different than Wheelie, Tammy, because it's longer. There's more
Right.
separation between the ramps and Wegmans access point. And Wegmans does have an access point, and there's going to be left and right turns into that clearly. And the road looks terrible. I mean, this is the entrance into Reston. So those people that wanted Reston Parkway to be a linear park will be very dissatisfied at this point. Same thing with Sunrise Valley, but you've heard me say that a million times at this point.
So just,
Okay.
John, if I could, just to add a little
Yes.
context to this, and I'm sorry if you can hear a little screaming in the background. I'm sitting on the back deck and my neighbors are out playing. So there's a little bit of context to the Reston Parkway crossing there. There were a couple of studies that were done that evaluated grade separated crossings of Reston Parkway. And the grade differential from the east side to the west side is so substantial that it's difficult to create enough room for a landing, particularly on the west side of Reston Parkway at that location. Just to give you context, if you've been to Seven Corners in the last 7 or 8 years, there's a crossing of Route 50 from one side of Route 50 to the other and lands in Seven Corners. And it's a pretty significant ramping system to be able to get accessibility down to the property. And this one would be, if memory serves me correctly, like another 25 feet higher than that crossing. So there have been analyses done of grade separated crossings at that location, but the extent of the ramping system that would be needed was one of the biggest challenges that came with that. Even if you could find a landing spot on both sides, it was how do you run the ramps out to be able to accommodate people, number one. And number two, there was I'll call it a back and forth between and among VDOT, Fairfax County Department of Transportation, Planning and Zoning, what was then Community Revitalization over at-grade crossings of Reston Parkway, with the notion being that if you want to slow down cars passing through the transit station areas, you do at-grade crossings as opposed to elevated crossings, because it forces cars to slow down in a way that improves pedestrian accessibility and connectivity. And you run into that position with VDOT's position that the toll road off ramp from the eastbound side of the toll road onto southbound Reston Parkway has what they call a limited access point, which falls under the Federal Highway Administration's jurisdiction. And basically what it means is you have to have a pretty significant distance between where the cars leave the ramp and the first pedestrian crossing, so that the cars don't come up screaming up at 45 miles an hour and ram into a pedestrian or a bicyclist. And so the combination of all of those things basically just forced the county included to punt the conversation about that crossing down the road, because of the disconnect between and among the different transportation agencies and the different objectives that everybody had. I still think the plan is to put an at-grade crossing right at the ramp exit point from the toll road that would then lead into the Tishman Spire site, kind of north of the toll road. But that's the last that I heard. But my larger point is, these things have been discussed and studied by lots of different folks, and there's not been a solution that everybody can agree upon that's been put on the table so far.
But we have to put something in this plan, right, Mark? So what would we put in the plan?
I think what I would, if you want to put in the plan, I would put in a plan an encouragement for a pedestrian crossing of Reston Parkway. If you think that an at-grade crossing is better than an elevated crossing, say that. If you think an elevated crossing is better than a at-grade crossing, say that. Whether you'll ultimately get it or not is going to depend on FCDOT, VDOT, MWA, Federal Highway Administration, probably the Department of Transportation generally, because they control the toll road right of way, and kind of where it ends up. I mean, there was some conversation at one point about doing a signalized intersection at the access point where Reston Heights and Brookfield's development come together on Reston Parkway, but even that had issues because it introduced a traffic light that slowed cars, that lowered the volume of throughput on Reston Parkway to a point that was unacceptable to VDOT. And so even just putting in a signal at that intersection was challenged. So I'm just saying, talk about what you want as an objective. Whether you're going to get there depends on a whole lot of folks who aren't in this conversation at the moment.
Okay, thank
That's
you,
good
Mark.
advice. I think that's good advice. We should do that.
Can I add just a comment here? This is Moira
Yeah,
again.
Moira.
Sorry, I keep adding comments about these things. Can I just say, I don't know what the residential development is around this corner here. I'm trying to think of who lives there, but Wegmans is a very pricey grocery store, as just like Whole Foods. So I hate to categorize it, but how many people do you think are actually going to be walking there? From, you've got USGS across the street, nobody lives there. Then you've got the golf course there, which takes up a lot. And if I recall, Reston Heights, I don't know how much residential is in there and if they're going to actually walk to the grocery store. And I don't know who's at the kitty corner over there. So I just don't see a lot of people walking to the grocery store, but maybe I'm wrong.
We might be right for the grocery store, but we want to get people to the metro station there.
People might walk there to work too.
Yeah.
And I have to disagree with Moira a little bit. I think they do being pretty Wegmans, not because they're high priced, because I can buy better there. Lots of people do walk to Wegmans from, the close by location. So I think this is an important intersection. Or
what if they just
walkway.
took the metro one more stop to Wheelie, Reston East?
We don't have a grocery store there.
Yeah, this is Charles. I'm piping in because I live there. Trust me, we're already crossing, and we're going to cross in great numbers. People living on, I'm in Hunter's Green, but there's a very large population building right across the street. They're all going to be going to Wegmans. And they have some apartments going up with about 300 or 400 units, and they have another one slated to be built. And there's a couple new developments, and they're already crossing Reston Parkway there. They just cut through VY and then cross over. And there's so many of them just going north on Reston Parkway.
I think the main thing is getting people to the metro. That's the point of putting the density there, is that they can access the metro.
Okay, that's helpful, because I'm thinking, if you're looking for equity, I would say Wegmans is an equitable grocery store, in my opinion.
Actually, all right, I don't normally speak up for people, but I go to Wegmans in Charlottesville all the time, and they have a lot of very cheap food. I mean, they have a fancy section, but the main body of it is not that bad.
They're a lot cheaper than Safeway and Giant and Harris Teeter.
I guess I haven't been to Wegmans in a while.
Yeah, Staples are cheap, and they got really good wine though. It's an interesting mix.
It's a basic solid grocery store, and there's none others. The only other option is to walk to Safeway, which is 2 miles to the east, or to Harris Teeter, which is a couple miles to the north.
If we're going to be urban, we should probably do like mini markets like New York City.
There you go, Mara. Bringing up the bodega again. Yeah, we chatted about that a little
totally
earlier.
for it.
I think the point is, though, looking at the way the section is written, Sinclair sent out the language for where it is in the current plan. It's just not adequate enough to describe the accessibility situation as written. It doesn't really, it kind of just is absent on that topic. And it clearly is a walking connectivity challenge one way or another, metro or food access.
Yeah.
Okay, so we move on?
Yeah, I before we move on, just real quick, there's some good information in the chat. Richard Cabellos, I don't know if, I think maybe what you put in there about some of the courts, maybe that applies to multiple areas. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, Supervisor. Yeah,
Okay.
I think the way that they are built out, and you'll see in the comments, there's some in Alexandria already in place, and the one that you know at Southgate Community Center, they're really set in, very scarce areas where there's not a lot of land. So I've been seeing a lot of development in terms of these and these courses you can play year round. You know, it's I think it's something new and something fresh for that type of community that Reston Town Center and the other areas you're looking at in that kind of urban, kind of dense area. I mean, I don't want to call it urban, but more like a dense area like that. These kind of small little football courts are really cool and really like a new way how to outreach instead of those long fields, that need like 5 acres, So yes, someone put in futsal is the new pickleball. So there's a lot of play and use you can use with those fields year round because it's outdoors and it's kind of like a softer type of asphalt that you use. So just thinking about it, I think something fresh for Reston would be really cool. If it's
All right, thank you very much, Richard. I didn't want to lose that before we moved on. So, okay, John.
Are we capturing somehow what people put in the chat?
Ooh, good question. Jose, is that something, can you cut and paste at least maybe and capture that?
Yeah, cutting and pasting as we go. Control
There
C,
we go.
Control V.
Okay, good. All right, next. So let's see, the town center west area. So that's got about everything you can think of. It's got the RA maintenance yard. It's got retail stores. It's got YMCA. It's got a lot of townhouses in there. It's got the hospital and then some more residential up to the north. Not a lot said about that, but there's the text. So anything to say about that one?
Anyone have any comments on anything with Town Center West? Any questions, comments?
I think some things don't need to be repeated, like the tree canopy, and unless there's something specific on the recreation would probably flow through all of these.
Okay, all right,
Is that
John.
mentioned in there, John?
What's that?
Thought there was a rec center to go in town center.
No, this isn't town center.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, this is not Town Center North. This is Town Center West.
Yeah. Mostly the hospital, and we want to leave opportunity for the hospital to expand. We might say that.
So is that what you're
how
going
far
to add,
is
John?
Go ahead.
I was going to say the hospital to expand is probably something that we need to,
Say.
write in here.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has a comment about that.
Not about the hospital. I just had a question. How far is this from the metro station? As I recall, it's not very far, maybe outside the half mile, but it would still be walkable.
Yes, it's outside the half mile. It's outside the half mile. And what's closest is the RA maintenance yard and Target. If you remember RTC West, that's the half mile.
Mm-hmm.
So it's beyond that.
Okay.
Yeah, John, yeah, just to fill that in a little bit. Yeah, I think there's a corner of it that's West Market that's closest, but that's stable, neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything that I would think would have any potential for changing. I think you nailed it. It's those just on the far western edge there, and then on the other side, you have to go up a ways to get to the hospital.
Yeah. Okay, next is the town center, which is no changes there. That's the existing town center. So I assume there wouldn't be much to say there. Maybe something about connections north-south.
Any comments on Town Center Urban Core?
We have the issue with the lawsuit going into the back of the library, that wooded area. So I don't know, you know, that's supposed to have a road connection from Reston Town Center to Reston Town Center North. But I'm not exactly sure how we handle that with a pending lawsuit. You know, I just guess assume that it was in the plan, that we keep it in the plan. It meaning the north-south access.
It's in the transportation plan, so if you want to say
Correct.
something, we certainly could.
Right. I think we should mention that.
Getting to Metro, of course, from the town center is important, whether it's a new road or whether it's a bridge across the WNOD trail
Correct.
or better sidewalks and green space along Reston Parkway. I forget, what is that on the west side? It's the Town Center Parkway.
Yeah, and I think it's very difficult to get to the metro station, even if you're on the other side, forgetting what Tammy was just talking about, going the other way on Library Street. Getting to the metro, the design of that is making it very difficult, and the walkability is going to be a real issue when that opens. And I don't know how to frame that in this, but I think it ought to be mentioned. We want walkability, and it's going to be difficult.
Gary, isn't that going to be improved when the BP project is finished with its central street area and all that?
Yeah, Library Street will extend all the way to Sunset Hills through Boston Properties.
Well, that's a ways away, I guess. Are you talking also about Town Center Parkway too, in the?
Yeah, I think so.
Underpass?
Parkway too.
But I think the walkability, even if you're in town center, is difficult getting to the metro station. And I mean, there's a reason for that. There's an agency sitting there that makes that very difficult. But somewhere I think it ought to be looked at for the future, how we, make this better for accessibility to the metro for the future.
I agree. I think that's a good comment.
Yeah, Gary, and there may be some modifications to the approvals there where that could be emphasized. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Okay. Is there any talk about the shelter down there at Town Center?
That's on the other side. That's in Town Center North.
Oh, north. Okay, sorry. Thank you for the clarification.
But by the way, we're coming back on Town Center North after it goes through Reston Design Review, which is in July, right?
Yeah, actually, John, it's actually teed up to go back to Design Review Board. I want to make sure the same layout is shown to the task force, and it's not quite ready yet. The same layout that goes to DRB. So that should be in the next few weeks.
I think the layout we have in the transportation, as far as the streets are concerned, is patterned after that. I think we're on the right track for that.
Yeah, in addition, some updated language.
Probably, yes.
Yeah, as well.
Okay. Moving right along. So now we have the Sunset Hills District and the Old Reston Avenue District. Let's start with the Old Reston Avenue District. That starts off with Weigel and NTB Auto Repair along Sunset Hills. I think that's a good thing. Then we have the Military Insurance Company that has a bunch of letters in it. I've forgotten what those are. And it has the old Bowman house in it. And that's along Reston Parkway. And then Old Reston Avenue is the eastern edge of it. So any comments? I think that's pretty much built out.
John, I just have a quick
Yes.
question. You know, when Reston did like historic, I don't know, it checked out its historic properties. How does that Bowman house, is it I don't know what it, I mean, it's a pretty
That
house, but I don't
property
know
is
it's
already
historic.
considered eligible.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I had a question on that one. I think that building has always struggled in trying to find a way to incentivize some kind of use for it.
It's
and
got
I
a
don't-
use now. It'll have a, yeah,
It's
it has an
being used.
excellent use. Yeah. The military insurance company will be in there.
No,
That's
I'm
there.
talking about the distillery itself, not the.
Oh, that's on the other side. That's in the other district, Sunset Hills District.
Okay, no, yes, I agree. That building has been in excellent use and has
Yeah.
been really helpful working with the ARB and its proposed updates it was going to do there. I think COVID kind of squashed those, though, sadly.
John Carter's information, he's referring to the Army Air Force Mutual Aid Association.
Right. Right. That's a great organization. Anything to be said about the Old Reston Parkway?
Yes, preserving the lily ponds.
Well, that's on the other
Not,
side.
yeah,
That's
no,
in
I thought
Sunset
we had,
Hills.
I'm sorry, I thought we had moved on to Sunset Hills.
You and me
Okay.
both, Tammy. We were jumping the gun.
Yeah, I was jumping the gun. I thought we were
We
done.
would include the Bowman House and the Old Reston Avenue. And then there's probably something to say about Reston Parkway. Charles Colby's somewhere here. I'm sure he'd be speaking up. Other than that, I think the land uses are okay. All right, so Sunset Hills District. So there's a couple ponds there. Tammy, is that right?
Yeah, the lily ponds.
Yes.
Just to give you a laugh, Tammy, the wetlands that are at Herndon Monroe during this time of year, they're essentially only lily covered.
Right, I know that. And Larry, technically aren't the lily ponds wetlands, or are they not?
I don't know if they would actually be considered wetlands. I mean, because they're existing, they may qualify. Mark Leaney might be able to know the answer to that as well. But you know, I've had conversations. I know P&Z has had conversations with Wheelock about those being in the public realm as opposed to on private cluster property. But they have an application already in, so I don't know if there's anything we can do in changing the language to the comprehensive plan at this point that could change that, given that they've got an application routing through.
And then how about the old town hall? So what should we say about that?
The historical building, the historic building.
Right. That's going to fall down one of these days.
The distillery?
Yeah.
Do you think we can find a way to stretch agritourism to incentivize use
Oh,
there?
let's not.
That's a thought.
I mean, because I would love to get someone in that building and set up a distillery running it.
Well, they have to grow 5 acres worth of crops. By the way, if I just recently went to that area, the old Fannie Mae, and that park is tremendous. That just is I mean, I've lived here a long time and never been there. That's somebody spent a lot of time designing that and incorporating the 3 ponds with the building. That is really spectacular. I think it's getting a little old and it needs maintenance, but it's quite the place. It's quite the open space.
It really is. I'm there quite a bit over the years here, and it's tremendous.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to say in here that we want that to be publicly accessible.
Yes.
There should be a pathway around it. It's right off the WNOD. It's very nearby. And isn't it part of the historic Wheelie or Reston or something?
Yes, it is.
Wheelie? One more reason for it to be publicly accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're going on WNO, to be able to go in that would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Well, that is where when the Virginia Tech students were presenting, that's where you want that connectivity between those
Right.
resources and that trailway is
right.
We connect the O&D to those types of properties, and hence getting something new working there in the distillery would be a fantastic lure to get more people to take the trail. But
Well, and the people who live off of North Shore, they have a pathway they can walk in, but they should be able to use the walk around the lily ponds too. I just think that's
Yes,
Yes.
that's very good. Okay. So the
Okay,
convention
and
center is out, I guess, huh? All
John,
right.
just a quick time check. It's 8:25. We've got about 35 more minutes, and I think we're down to just one more TOD,
Yep.
non-TOD area, right?
Right,
And then
that's right.
and then the Virginia Tech. So let's keep going.
We're moving right along. Okay, this is the Reston East area. Now, the language here again is out of the plan. There may be other areas in the plan that talk about this, but this is probably underrepresented a bit in the plan. It's a large, very large area. And it's got a lot of different things in it, from a hotel, there's electrical supply company, there is some pretty glorious office buildings in there, low scale. I think a lot of the site planning is pretty good in there. So this has got a variety of things in it. Again, my recommendation is to keep the intensity, the floor area ratio about the same as it is in the existing zones. There's some pretty high zones there, quite a lot of density on the west side, but most of this is I3, I believe. Let me just flip back to that for a second. Yeah, most of it's I3, particularly on the south side. And then a variety of things on the north side. It butts up against Lake Fairfax Park. So there might be some comments about that. Oops. Yeah. So maybe we take the north and south sides separately. And this is going to take some creativity. There are developers, and maybe Mark can speak up here, or there. I'm not sure whether it's Mark's firm or not, but there are office buildings in here that would like to take down some of the larger ones. There are multiple office buildings, and maybe they take down one or two and put some residential up. I don't know if you could come up with something would be pretty fabulous from a design perspective. I think I would like that. I hate to lose some of our small businesses that are in here, particularly on north of the toll road. I think that's where some of the small businesses are. So
Yeah,
that would be my perspective. This would be a retention of some of the small businesses. It would allow some limited housing in it. And then we develop some criteria on what it would take from an approval perspective, but not an increase in development. I think we did our increase at the metro stations. We should probably keep the lid on this area to a certain extent, but that's my perspective.
Yeah, and John, let me just add to that a little bit. So as you mentioned, I have heard, even just in my year and a half in office, I have heard from several of those property owners who are struggling, and even before the pandemic, they were coming in, struggling to get tenants in their old office parks and asking about alternatives. So it'd be helpful if I could get if we could get direction on if and when it might be appropriate for, again, not increasing the density or the intensity of the development on these properties, but if or when it might be appropriate to go to mixed use or even residential. How much consolidation, how much, how should it connect with surrounding properties, that kind of thing. And this was one of the challenges I think that was put out for the Virginia Tech group as well. And they kind of came back with their take. Tammy, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I was just reading an article by the president of George Mason, and he's has the challenge of providing many more classrooms for George Mason. And I think that the South area would be a stupendous area for George Mason to, target. The other thing about the South is we need affordable housing. If there's going to be housing in this area, we don't want to, congregate all affordable. It needs to be mixed income housing, but it needs to include a substantial amount of affordable. So those are the two comments I see for the South area. The North area is industrial and less glorious for, residential. I see the North as staying with the uses it's there and maintaining industrial. We cannot give up all of our industrial zoning. Thank you.
See if this is Bill. I'd just like to chime in agreement with Tammy on both of the points, trying to bring educational. That way we can reuse the existing buildings. They'd fit in, or they could anyway. Maybe some adaptation, but not a tear down. There's some huge parking lots that, at least at the moment, are pretty empty, and some kind of mostly affordable or at least substantially affordable housing in there. Some of them are close enough that you could walk or bike to the metro within levels I used to do. And so in that context, if we got creative proposals, maybe some additional density would be appropriate. It's a rezoning, so you could allow for that. I think the RCIG is not within the PRC, so it could be done in the rezoning area. And there are also some parking lots that
Right, it's all industrial.
Fields. Yeah, and there's some parking lots that might be turned into fields, but I doubt that'll happen.
You've got the cycle track along Sunrise Valley on the south side. You've got concerns, I assume, about compatibility to the neighborhood to the south as well. Not so much on the north.
On the north, there's also a couple of other considerations. You have a number of large businesses that have been more IT oriented. You got Walmart Tech, you got Walmart Labs, even have federal offices or businesses associated with federal that have been in the IT businesses, such like Booz Allen Hamilton, and also even Social Security Administration's over in this property. On that, you have to look at how it's marketed. Hasn't been pushed very recently, but that is one of the things that has the strength. But it also has, as Tammy pointed out, even in that area has the potential for education uses. Several of the buildings are directly capable of classroom type use with very little reconstruction required. They're heavily in a number of those buildings, got very good IT infrastructure already existing in them. I'm aware of that.
I had heard that I think that the Makerspace lost their lease or wasn't going to be allowed to stay in Isaac Newton Square. It would be great if we could get some more tech and innovation in this area, because we do have some businesses as you move closer towards the Hunters Mill toll road as well, that are a number of tech businesses there on the south side. I do think, you do have the issue with the neighborhoods to the south, and I say issue, but I think that really needs to be considered, and how this will all flow together, because that's just simply we did not get that with Campus Commons, and I think anything that's close to a repeat like that would just be unacceptable. Additionally, I think the notion that this could be, there's walkable areas, but we simply cannot plan for it not to be also have cars. I mean, it just,
No, that's understood.
Yeah, no, agreed. But I just think, a complete focus on, or, removing cars is just not going to work here and where
No.
that is.
Could I add one other comment? And this is really for you, Walter. I think these areas are ones where your leadership and Fairfax County leadership could be very important. If you want an education, a university type educational institution there, you should be marketing that to educational institutions, and George Mason would be great, but there are other entities that could be very useful to have there, adding to the strength of Reston's economy as well as its social life and opportunities. And maybe there's even a space for a business incubator using one of those spaces. And again, that would take some government prodding and the support, but a business incubator could help small businesses and some creativity that would be very valuable. But your leadership, I think, will be important. Thank you.
Yeah, Bill, thank you very much. Frankly, I've already been reached out and had at least some initial discussions with a couple of institutions of higher education with exactly that in mind, and I need to expand that a little bit, I think.
That was
Thank
one
you.
of the
Great, thank
things that why Walmart Labs put its facility with Walmart Tech into that area in Reston. In fact, Walmart Labs last year also put a bid to do a 10-year lease with one of the two office buildings on Monroe Street in the Hernan Monroe area. But I'm not sure that they're going to follow through with that. Just letting you know.
Walter,
It'd
if
be
I
great
could,
if we could look into some 3D printing as well. I mean, I think that there would just be a lot of opportunities there. And I know that there are a number of businesses, and if we could work on marketing this area for that, I think that would just be fabulous.
Well, Michelle, the technical term for 3D printing is additive manufacturing, which is completely consistent with the I-zones. So
Yes.
it goes around, comes around a little bit.
Yes.
Mark, I heard, Mark, were you going to say something?
yeah, I was just going to chime in and try to draw a little finer point on a couple of these items, because I think each of these geographic areas is different and has different needs and different expectations, to where the conversation's sort of been lumping them all together. And I really do think that they're different. The conversation about Walmart Labs, that area is in the Park Ridge development that is east of Preston White Drive, closer to Hunter Mill Road. Those buildings were built largely in the 1990s to even the mid 2010s. And so those buildings are relatively new by comparison to other places. Preston White Drive, most of those buildings were built in the 1970s, and they're typically 2 or 3 stories in height, and the infrastructure for those buildings is aging. So consequently, the owners are faced with really, I'll say, declining demand for that type of office space, coupled with significant capital expenditures to bring the buildings up to current code. And there's a point of inflection there that, they've got to figure out what they're going to do with the building. And that's probably, I suspect, why you're hearing from them wanting to talk about some different uses. The same thing is true for Lake Fairfax Business Park. Lake Fairfax Business Park was zoned back in the late 70s. Most of the buildings there were developed in the mid 1980s. A number of the buildings are either currently vacant or underutilized. I want to say that Freddie Mac moved out of 2 buildings within the last 6 months. They're completely vacant. There's a third building that's owned by another landlord in there that is also vacant. So there's 3 buildings in the front part of Lake Fairfax Business Park that have 0 occupancy with them. And then a 4th building that's at like 20 or 25%. And so over that same period of time, we've introduced different uses into Lake Fairfax Business Park, where you have Lifetime Fitness, you have the new hotel that's under construction now, you have the data center right out on Sunset Hills Road. And so there's a hodgepodge of conditions that exist in that area to where I think you're really at a point where you've got to think about repurposing some of that area, or you're going to end up with buildings that continue to decline in their value and in their quality. And it'd be great if you could attract a single tenant to come in and take over the 3 vacant office buildings and pump a bunch of money into it. But I think the difficulty lies in that's not where the market is trending. The market is trending and has been to putting office workers adjacent to Metro because, golly, that's what we intended to do. And so these outer lying areas are struggling to compete with the newer, shinier stuff that sits in the toll road. It's not to say that you can't find somebody to do it, but it's extremely difficult, and the rents that they're going to pay are going to be less than what it takes to upkeep the building and add capital expenditures to make it a better building. And so it's this spiral that they get in that you've got to figure it out. If I had my druthers, not based on what I do, but just projecting out on how do you make this area continue to be vibrant, I'd focus in on how can you encourage redevelopment of some of these older areas, Preston White Drive, Lake Fairfax Business Park, with the appropriate incentives to ensure that you get some of the things that maybe you're missing in other areas. Consolidation of parcels, attention to affordable housing, connections on the north side to the WNOD trail, all of in the linear park concept. All of those things can be additive to the community without taking away some of the other uses that are up there. And I'm not saying the whole place needs to go, but there's 3 or 4 buildings in Lake Fairfax Business Park that are totally vacant now, and they don't know what they're going to do to fill the space. And so it's a real world problem is my point.
So I wanted to bring up one concept, though, as we're looking at these areas, that we consider that any changes or any added density is supported on site, and that the density that we're bringing into the city has the facilities and infrastructure to support those new residents where they are. So I think we've talked about this in other concepts too, of maybe an earned density, but I think it's more of ensuring that any density that it's supported. And so that's not just putting money into a pot that maybe one day will go to a park in Reston, but it's ensuring that the property has adequate playgrounds and smaller parks, or like what Richard sent around with the courts, and making sure that it's really an integrated area on these on each individual site.
In other words, not a Woodland Park
Yeah.
dynamic.
Right.
And I do think that with the right critical mass, you can do some of those things, right? The issue comes in where you have I'll call them one-off projects, right? That are single projects in a particular area. And one of the things that I think you could do in Lake Fairfax or in Preston White Drive in particular is to encourage consolidation of more than one parcel to try to get a critical land mass to be able to do some of those things. You're not going to build an elementary school on the same property as every new development, right? You can't do it, doesn't work. You're still going to be pooling funds to buy and repurpose a building for a school or to purchase property for a school site, but you can and should be expecting to get, and I think most developers, people may disagree with exactly what was picked, but I'm not aware of any development that's been approved that has any significant intensity to it that doesn't have some sort of park, some sort of playground, some sort of open space area that goes along with it. They just wouldn't get through the process without that. Even the Seacus Homes development on Sunrise Valley Drive has a playground on top of the gas line. And so, and that was however many 40 townhouses that got built. So even that was contributing to that. I think it's a question of setting expectations based on the corresponding size of the development.
So Reston Heights does not have a playground. And when I asked where the children would play, they said there's some planters on the roof. So, you know, I mean, I don't think that, I don't think.
I know you're not going to care about this when I tell you that, but Reston Heights was approved under the 2001 comprehensive plan, because when it was approved, the 2014 comp plan had not yet been adopted. The same thing is true with the Aperture. I hear, you know, lots of folks complaining about the transformers that are on Sunset Hills Road in front of the Aperture. It's because the 2001 version of the comp plan didn't take those things into account. The 2014 comp plan does, and you can't get away with that anymore. And there's no way that the developments coming in under the 2014 comp plan were held to a different standard than things that were approved prior to that adoption. And so most of what you've seen built today was all built under the 2001 comprehensive plan, not the 2014 comp plan. So all of the expectations that were set out in the 2014 plan have been entitled and zoned, but not necessarily built yet. So I just caution people not to judge Reston Heights, not to pick on them, but I'll use your example. Don't use them as the end all be all of what development in Reston overall is going to look like, because it was a completely different set of policies and guidance that went with that.
There's interesting districts across the country. They're called innovation districts, and maybe some homework for folks. Innovation districts, look that up, and there's some glorious examples across the country. Another term is eco districts. We even have those in Washington. There are interesting things that other jurisdictions have done. Trouble with this one is it's almost not bad enough yet to get that wholesale redo. This is going to be piecemeal for a while, I think. So do we get what we want over time is the challenge here. How to get what you want over time.
Yeah, John, maybe an idea, and I think this is going to require a little more discussion by the task force. You know, maybe an idea would be if you could maybe come back with a couple of options, you know, for how to approach this. And I think maybe to get some more discussion. I think it's a really good discussion tonight. But
yeah.
Can I? This is Moira. Can I?
Oh yes, Mara, and then let's try to move on. Mara, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually work there, so I'm very familiar with this whole parcel. One of the things I do know, John, is that the access from the WO&D or any of those parcels on the opposite side of that road to get to the Lake Fairfax is not so simple. I mean, it'd be nice if there was an actual, like, here's the path, because otherwise you're going through parking lots, and it just doesn't seem like an easy find.
Steep too. It's steep up there.
Yeah, so just somehow to connect you to the park would be ideal. I mean, in an ideal world, I would put a road from Michael Faraday connected over to McDonald's, because it seems like those are two dead ends, but that's just me. But I also like the idea of a school, university, I don't know, you know, some sort of research or something. What I would love to see is if you could plow down those three buildings, make one parcel, and do like a big sculpture park, and you could have a really nice park garden there. But that's just me in an ideal world. But I like your idea. I mean, I think this is it's been a really great session. I think this is probably one of the best sessions that I've ever attended, because we're really actually talking about ideas and text. And so I really thank you for this night. Before I hop off, Walter, I wondered if at some point we could entertain talking about, since CDC has changed their guidelines, if at some point in the future we might actually meet together in masks, or, you know, or however we do it, but it might be, you know, coming to that time.
You know, thank you for bringing that up, Mara. You know, Yeah, let's bring back maybe to the next meeting. Why don't we have everybody think about that, and then let's put that on the agenda for discussion the next meeting. When and if we might want to move it at least to some sort of a hybrid, where folks that were comfortable in getting together could do so. Okay, thank you, Myra. John, are anything else on the Reston East districts?
No, I think that's it. I got some other ideas in other areas, but maybe we ought to not bring up a new topic at this point. I am concerned about how these districts rub up against the TOD districts, particularly next to Campus Commons, particularly Association Drive. And there was another one, I can't think of what it is right now. So we might talk about those at some point.
Yeah, thank you, John. I know those transition areas are a little
Yeah,
tricky.
it's a transition and how you do that. I know Michelle brings that up quite a lot, particularly Campus Commons and how that relates back to the existing neighborhood and how it's connected to the parcels next to it.
Okay, John, thank you. And before we forget this discussion or totally move beyond the discussion of older office parks, well, first of all, let me just say, John, thank you very, very much for putting these slides together, for leading the discussion, and thanks to everybody on the task force for your input, for doing some real thinking on this. There will be, John, I guess at some point, well, we're talking about sometime in the next few weeks, Town Center North, obviously the Reston East is going to come back, and then of course the other areas where you had input, and you'll be putting together some new language for that. And then let's also, we'll need to have a conversation about the TOD areas as well. So, so yeah, those will be, stay tuned, I think, for all of those. Anything else, John, before we move off these?
I think it's probably time to put the chapters together. I think we've got the first crack at the principles. We'll write this up as far as it goes, the land use. We've been through convenience centers, village centers, the hot spots, the other commercial areas, and now we went through the non-TOD areas, and we'll have the TOD areas, the open space, transportation. We could probably put those all together in one piece here. And then the other chapters can join as they finish, the heritage and the health and wellness and the equity chapters. I think it's time to start thinking of putting them together. I guess my thought.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody have any concerns about that? Okay, all right, good. Then we'll, I think, start bundling these different chapters together and see if how they fit together and how coherent the different drafts look. And of course, we're continuing to work on each of the topic areas in the subgroup reports. I did want to, before, again, we get too far away from this discussion that we just had on Reston East. Jose, I know this was an area that I know the last thing on the agenda, and we've got, I guess, 7 minutes. The Virginia Tech Group did also weigh in with some ideas on that. Jose, I don't know if you want to, do you want to lead us through that very quickly?
Yeah, I know I only have like 6 minutes, but I can try to be as brief and or specific as needed. So yeah, we had the Virginia Tech students present last month some of the recommendations, and they were looking at one Preston White, but also the WND. And this past week, I sent again the one-page recommendations and the presentations, because I think they really enjoyed the project, and I think they came with some creative ideas. But and I didn't know if I know from the group there was a need to probably incorporate either some or all of these into the comp plan. So what I'll do is actually I guess I'll start with the one pager for the Preston White team, and I guess just to be kind of brief, I know we had talked just briefly on housing and the educational being in the Reston East district. But some of the recommendations that this group had kind of presented included housing, from building construction, including mass timber, the parking requirements, but they also came with some commercial and retail recommendations, like attracting makers and creators in micro commercial spaces, and making sure that there's ground floor retail to meet the needs of the tenants, including high quality eateries, small format grocery, local produce, community healthcare, education, and boutiques. And I'll go briefly on some of the highlights that I kind of got from this group, from the Press and White team. There was a lot of transportation recommendations. I think they had shown their little PowerPoint with I believe like a bus rapid transit line, but I thought some of the neat ones were for open space, arts and culture, preserving the mature trees that were on site. I remember this past winter they walked the site, and they really didn't want it, the trees to go down. It's actually kind of nice to be there on a spring or summer day. I know there's empty parking lots. So again, these were all either all or some of these recommendations. We can open it up to comments. I know we have like 3 minutes, but I guess I just wanted to get some reaction from the task force today on some of these, and we can continue this at the next meeting or a later one. But any comments so far? I can't see hands, so if anyone wants to unmute.
I am loving the keep the mature trees. I can't
Yay.
love that enough. That is so critically important.
Thank you, Tammy. Well, that's a good one. Yeah, that's the one I I gravitated to when I read the document. Any other comments from the task force?
Yeah, Jose, could you scroll back up? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm only seeing the bottom of the thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Jose, this is Chris. I really liked the microgrid proposal because I think energy conservation and the creative solutions like that are going to be something that, we're going to need to be thinking about much further into the future. And I had never heard of that until they presented it and did a bunch of digging on that. And I think that's a really cool incentive that I would like to keep us highlighting.
Thank you, Chris. I think that's a good comment.
I have a quick question though, just on how you're intending to incorporate this into the plan. What is the thought exactly?
Well, I mean, I know that there was some discussion of including some of these in maybe the district recommendation. I know this one pertains mainly to Press and White, but maybe there's some common themes that can be incorporated in some of the, I think the group was kind of looking at office parks in general. Maybe there's some language for these other office parks. I remember Mark Malcolm mentioned that there was like a Sprint T-Mobile office park in the Herndon West area. So maybe it could be general. I guess ultimately, I guess getting a sense from the group of where they're kind of going with some of these recommendations, whether they belong site specific or general.
I think some of these would be great for general. I don't think that we're at the stage where we should be using this for that area though. I mean, as we just talked about tonight, I don't know that we want to necessarily do this right now with the Reston East area.
Okay.
Yep, I agree with Michelle, and I do think that there's one thing that is missing from the active transportation electrification area, and that is to provide charging stations. I just didn't see those in there.
Good comment, Glenn. I didn't see that either.
Thank you, Jose.
Yeah.
Any other? I know we're creeping up a minute to 9, so any final?
This is Bill. I just say I think it's a creative suggestion for how you can redevelop some of these areas in the outer areas. This is one that might work. I'm not sure unless you put in a whole lot of residential and commercial. I'm not sure you're going to support a lot of new retail. But on the other hand, it's very close to South Lake Shopping Village Center, and it'll be close to the Wheelie area. So they may not have to redo everything their own. But anyway, I think it's a lot of good ideas.
Thank you, Bill.
There may be some things that are just required. Some of the street things, the tree preservation, they might be just required no matter whether you're putting an addition onto Weigel Auto Repair or whether you're getting the glamorous national headquarters of some major corporation in here. Some things just required. And then maybe there are some that, like Preston White, which is a little more glorious than some of these others, that they might have more wherewithal to do this. But let's not forget the Kolb Electric and the post office and things like that every community needs. So some way of doing both. I don't know. We all tend to gravitate towards the bright, shiny objects, I guess. But let's not forget all those other things that make a community work. So maybe again, there are things that are just required. And then there are some things that if you're a glamorous use, then you're going to have a lot of criteria to address: affordable housing and energy conservation and some of those things. But maybe some of the others not quite as much. So we encourage small businesses in this. Maybe this is the small business area, at least a portion of it.
Maybe. Yeah, thanks.
How you put that together, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's, I guess I got a pretty good feedback from the group, and yeah, feel free to send me any additional comments. I know we're past 9 now. Supervisor?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jose. And remember the other, we'll come back and bring at a future task force meeting the other recommendation, the other area that the Virginia Tech students were working on, and see how anything from that might be incorporated or at least considered. And that was the linear park concept along the.
Yeah, that should be in the open space chapter right now. So.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Well, very good. It's 9:02. Does anyone have any last minute comments, questions before we wrap up tonight?
Can I add something?
Oh, Lynn?
I just said great meetings tonight, but I think Gary wanted to add something.
Yes, Gary.
I did. I just wondered if we're going to get the presentation on affordable housing from our housing people, so we can get the input on that to kind of look towards writing, the housing area up.
Great question. Jose, do you know the timing on that?
Yeah, I think we're trying to figure a date to bring them in. So I'll have to work with staff to make sure that they're ready to present back to the group.
Hopefully we'll see if we can do it in the next week or two, Gary.
Thank you.
We can do. Okay, great. Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, listen, thanks everybody. I know a lot of people doing a lot of stuff right now. I think we're kind of on a roll, so let's keep going, and we'll see everybody again next week. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Thanks,
Great.
John Carter.
Great meeting.